Welcome to On Record PR, where we discuss the latest news, insights, and strategies that matter most to law firm leaders. We are your hosts, Jennifer Simpson Carr and Gina Rubel. Hi, Gina.
Hey, Jen. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Welcome back to the official post Labor Day start of um,
What time did you get up today? You've got to be exhausted from taking your daughter to school and back to
first day.
school. First
Yes, it's been
day
a long
today?
day.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sure it has. I'm sure our listeners get it. So many people are trying to navigate whatever the new normal is, and it seems to be changing every day.
Yes, actually, we'll be talking about that today. So, we are recording this episode to release on Monday, September 8th. Throughout the summer, the growing list of law firms increasing their return to office mandate has been a very popular topic of conversation. And
Well,
we're all
I'm going to beg to differ. I think there's a lot of people saying it's not popular, but
really, that's
I don't.
interesting.
I think there's a lot of people who don't want to return to the office, and it's a double-edged sword, right? So we're going to talk about it today, but there's definitely a double-edged sword there.
Yeah, and I do think a lot of the media coverage we've seen it focuses on the AmLaw 50, which is
Right.
maybe why it's been such a big topic. I know that we've seen recently 4-day in-office requirements has become kind of a new standard. There has been a lot of coverage about Paul Weiss, Skadden, Ropes, Weil, Wilmer Hale, et cetera, requiring 4 days in the office. But to your point, we've also seen coverage contrary to that as well.
Well, and it's interesting because in August, DLA Piper bumped up their U.S. corporate associates, and I'm stressing corporate there from 3 to 4 days a week, and they signaled an attendance that will factor into their evaluations. In fact, Dwayne Morris has also moved to a 4-day policy, so it isn't just the AmLaw 50 anymore.
Hmm, interesting. Um, and then kind of the other side of that is we saw that Blackwell is continuing with fully virtual offices. And I know that talent is part of our conversation today, so we'll go over that too.
Well, and
Um,
we should mention internationally, A&O Sherman, they're going to begin enforcing a 4-day schedule in September. And in London, the firm even tied bonus eligibility for junior lawyers to maintain at least 60% office attendance. So we're not just seeing it in the US, and I think that's important to be mindful of, but there's definitely, as I said, a double-edged sword.
Yeah, so let's start with the why. What are we hearing about why firms are, or at least kind of the larger AmLaw 50 firms are moving into this reinforced in-office schedule?
Well, for as a former litigator, I think this is where I talk about the double-edged sword. So mentorship and learning is really important. And I'm thinking about my son who is planning to go to law school. And I keep wondering what's going to happen to him in his first year. Is he going to have a job as an associate, as a first year associate? Number one. Number two, will he have access to more seasoned attorneys, more senior attorneys and partners who will be able to train him the way I was trained? I sat second chair before I ever had my own trial. And so partners do worry about associates missing critically on job training, um, that osmosis effect, as you will, of learning from hallway conversations, quick check-ins, and shadowing partners is much harder to replicate on something like Zoom or Teams. I'd say we do it here, but it's not easy.
Mhm.
So as somebody who had the benefit of learning from both colleagues and peers, there's definitely a benefit to being in office.
We had an episode with Mark Beasy from our international faculty last week, and he called it water cooler moments. which I think are really important. I mean, I remember being in-house and saying, oh, I know so and so, right? This partner or this practitioner really likes to grab their coffee around this time, or the firm's hosting a snack session at this time, and I'd make sure I was there just to be able to have conversations about the matters the attorneys were working on, or, learn more about what it is they're looking to do from business development perspective.
There's so much you learn and so many more questions you can ask. So, I equate it to Jen. I mean, full disclosure, we are a distributed team, right? But you worked in the office yesterday and we got so much done.
Mm.
And actually, it was a real pleasure to have you. And we sat and you overhear things. And one of the benefits years ago when we were all in the office and all in an open air environment, I don't recommend that for law firms, by the way, but we were. And people would hear me on new business calls. They'd get a sense of how you do things, why you do things. So that does get lost in a virtual environment.
So I hear you say culture and collaboration are a big part of this. Why as well?
It is. And culture, and you've heard me say that a lot. And it's very hard to reinforce culture and collaboration virtually. I think we as a team have done a great job. And I spend a lot of time on Zoom calls, on Slack calls, on Teams calls. But it's not quite as easy. And yet, going back to that double-edged sword, to have a fully inclusive environment also means giving people the tools to do other things that are required by them, like care for family members. So there are a lot of firms I've known over the years that have had more flexible work environments where people could work from home when they needed to, but it wasn't a part of the job. And those same firms had greater retention rates of, in particular, women, or, and I'll say women, but those people who are the caregivers in their families, whether it's for young children or aging parents or sick family members. So I don't think there's one answer on the
Mhm.
why, but culture and collaboration is important. It helps to, you learn more about people. You read their faces. You can ask, how are you today? More readily. So it comes more naturally, in fact, to lawyers in a physical environment.
Hmm. What are we hearing from the client perspective?
I think it's all over the board.
Yeah, me too.
Your more traditional clients say that they've raised concerns about responsiveness and want assurance that their outside counsel teams are available. And then you have other ones that are fully distributed companies, like all these AI companies and these tech companies, and they just want you to get the work done, get it done right, get it done fast, and use their tools to do it. So there's no one answer. There's no one right answer.
Yeah. I've, I mean, as long as I've been working in legal, which is much less time than you, but uh, responsiveness, I think, has always come up as a concern. So a little bit of me feels like it's an, a reason the firms may be using.
Yeah, and responsiveness has always been an issue. It's the longest issue that we've ever heard about, and it continues, because the other thing is lawyers aren't, even if they're in the office, they're not always at their desk. So if they're litigators, for example, they could be on trial for months and responsiveness drops, and they're not in the office. So these RTO mandates, I do understand them, but it's not going to change responsiveness. I think that's a bad excuse to use, frankly.
Yeah. So let's talk about, and you touched on this too, but let's talk about the risks. I've heard you say double-edged sword a couple of times, so you've kind of touched on both sides of the issue. But I think talent retention is the first thing that comes to mind for me, which is, are attorneys going to start thinking, well, if I have to be in the office 4 days a week and a firm that I've been eyeing for the last couple of years has a more flexible work model, now maybe I'm actually going to take that consideration more seriously. What are your thoughts on that?
So for the people who have been in firms for the last 5 years, there's going to be a big retention issue, especially the younger people who know nothing else and have become accustomed, or people who have started young families and don't currently bear the burden of huge child care expenses. So I guess one question is, are some of those firms going to implement child care in those offices? Are they going to, which they used to do. Many firms used to have child care in the buildings for children not of school age. So it, again, that other side of that sword, as you will, I keep saying that, there's a huge benefit to some of the Gen Z and millennials who want to be learning from others, who don't want to be at home, who find it lonely, who don't necessarily have a huge network and want to be out networking. So there's going to be a shift. So retention is going to be a challenge. However, the shift, I do believe, will eventually even out. So the firms that can keep a competitive advantage on being more distributed will get the people who need that. And the firms who have return to office mandates are going to get the people who want that too. There's just going to be a huge shift in the short term. And that's life.
Yeah, that's true. So let's break here for a message from our sponsor, and then we come back. We are going to talk about the messaging around these return to office policies and what success looks like from a leadership perspective.
This episode is brought to you by Furia Rubel Communications, a public relations and marketing agency serving law firms and businesses worldwide. With an expert team positioned throughout the U.S. and supported by an international faculty, Furia Rubel enhances our clients' brands through integrated communications by providing expert guidance in crisis management and high-profile litigation, protecting brand and reputation, and supporting internal marketing teams. To learn more, visit furiarubel.com.
So, Gina, we're back from our sponsor message, and we've talked about why firms are moving back to return to office and some of the risks that they bear when they make these changes. What are you seeing firms and leaders doing successfully to manage the communication around these RTO policies and changes?
So Jen, just for 1 second before we go there, I just want to share two other risks because we mentioned talent retention, but we didn't mention equity concerns or legal exposure. And so it's really important to be mindful that there are risks and how the messaging plays into those risks. So I'm not going to go into great detail. Perhaps we could add a little bit on the show notes on the website about those concerns. But it's really important to be transparent. So in the communications and the takeaways, as you will, our listeners listen to the podcast for a reason, right? It's not just this is what's happening, they all know that, but it's what can we do about it? And so transparency is so important, and talking to people early and often. So providing clarity on expectations. What does 4 days a week mean? Do they get to choose those days? Is it Monday through Thursday? Is it what does it actually mean? Is it flexible? Could it be Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday? Some firms are saying, no, you always have to be on Fridays because we don't want you taking off. Or, so it's an interesting dynamic, but that transparency, defining consequences fairly. What does it mean and why does it matter? And how are people being judged? Because at the end of the day, if firms are saying, well, this is going to be tied to your compensation or this is going to be tied to your reviews, they're ultimately being judged. How is it being tracked? Are we using a timestamp again? Or, is when they come in, is it being tracked on their using AI? Let them know. Right. So these are things, and I don't know how firms are tracking it. I'm sure one of our listeners can share that, but how are they tracking it? then highlighting the benefits. How does this, and I know we want to say it's all about the client, right? We want to say it's all about the firm and the team. But we live in a world today where it's what's in it for me. So why is this good for the person who has to return to the office X number of days a week when they've been working from home, being able to multitask and doing a good job of it? So is there stronger collaboration? Are they going to learn quicker? Are they going to grow quicker? Are they going to have more access to other practice areas where they might be interested in growing? More cross-selling opportunities, bonuses, promotions, evaluations, relationships, whatever the case might be, define it and explain what those benefits are. And then pair those policies with your perks. Do you have in-office wellness programs? Are you upgrading the workspace? Are you providing a meal space or lunches or 1 day a week lunch or professional development programming in person as opposed to virtual? I mean, I love both, but if you want them to attend. So I think those are two of the things that need to be done.
I think the office investment or the collaboration space point that you made is interesting. I know there was a report that in Q1 this year alone, law firms leased a tremendous amount of physical office space. I think it was something like 4.5 million square feet, which was the strongest quarter on record. So I suspect that as these office mandates continue, leaders are going to consider that they want to put that investment of physical space to good use, and that may be a driving factor as well.
Oh, sure. Real estate and real estate costs is a huge driving factor. Well, you know, Jen, it's interesting. I have a question for you. So in this idea of communicating and evaluating, so at Fury Ruble, we also often will communicate something, but we don't do it once. And it's the how and the why and the when. So what are some ways that you think our listeners can be communicating and how should they be doing it? We've talked about transparency, we've talked about benefits, but the actual tactical pieces, as a member of our management team, what would you recommend?
So my mind goes to how we advise clients on any type of strategic communications plan, which is you don't write it once and then put it, in a drawer and never or file it on your computer and never look at it again. So I would say what comes to mind tactically is regular check-ins, right? Putting processes in place where you can check in on how this new mandate is going, what success looks like, and are you meeting those markers? Sharing success stories. I think about getting buy-in and having champions within your firm. Are there success stories just like, successful cases that you've managed or promotions? Like, what does success look like? And can you share examples of those internally to start to demonstrate that you're living the why and that it's working? And then I would say, like anything else we do that's planning, uh, make adjustments. I think we all have learned through COVID that flexibility is paramount. And I think making a decision that's in the best interest of your organization is important, but also being open to being flexible as you're getting those, that feedback, as you're sharing those success stories. Are there ways that the firm needs to consider adjusting in order to even better serve um, your employees?
I would add too, and I agree with all of that. Those are some really great tips for people, for our listeners and viewers. I would say also find champions at every level. So a 1L, a 2L, a 3L, a 5L, a young partner, non-equity, an equity partner. So having those champions that look and sound and feel like me. So another mom who, for me, I'm not a young mom anymore, but another young mother who is benefiting, who can be a champion to why this It could be, this helps my mental health. It helps me get away from the house a little bit to really focus my attention. So finding the champions that culturally fit with your, I'll call them special interest groups, as you will, so that it's not just the firm, not just the leaders, because frankly, as a CEO of a company, if it doesn't come from everybody else, I'm never going to get full buy-in, right? So I think making sure that you have those champions in place is really helpful.
Yeah, I agree with that. Um, I think we have probably hit all of the points we've wanted to share today. Thank you. I'm excited to be back on a schedule where we're talking more about the news and the timely topics, but I've also appreciated a little bit of a timing break over the summer. Um, so I want to thank our listeners as well. We are so grateful that you tune in each week. If you've enjoyed this episode, please share it, subscribe to the show, consider leaving a review, and we love to receive your feedback and topics at podcast@furiarubel.com. Gina and I will see you next week.
See you next week, everyone. Have a good one.
On Record PR is produced by Jennifer Simpson-Carr and Matt Henderson, with support from the team at Furia Rubel Communications. This episode is edited by Isabel Horan and Christian Yamula. Visit www.onrecordpr.com for resources and more information.